Here we go.
Alright, welcome back to the channel, and today I want to talk about something just near and dear to my heart in WoW Classic, and that is do's and don'ts for playing in a group, specifically doing dungeons in WoW Classic. This is relevant for any of the World of Warcrafts, honestly, but I'm going to be talking about WoW Classic specifically. So if you like this kind of content, be sure to leave me a like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz, and we'll just jump right into it. So before we talk about some of the do's and don'ts, let's talk about the reasoning I have for wanting to make this video. And literally that's because nobody really wants to tank in WoW. You know, it's just a hassle. People have found so many ways to piss off tanks that, most people don't want to tank. I enjoy tanking, and there's still a lot of times where I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want the hassle, and I just won't do it. And 90% of the groups you see in the looking for group channel, they're looking for a tank. They're waiting on a tank. So there's definitely something to that. And a lot of the reason that nobody really wants to tank is because you run into so many jackasses in your groups that are doing things to actively make your job of tanking a dungeon harder. So we're going to talk about some of the things that you should do and not do in a dungeon to make it easier on your tank and to make a group progress quicker. Now, I know everybody is focused on, I want to do more DPS. I want to win. I want to be the top person on the DPS chart. And that's a lot of the problem. It's become less about, the most efficient way to get through a dungeon, the best use of your time getting through a dungeon, and more about, can I be the top DPS? This group specifically, you can, I'm going to mention it now so you can watch it throughout the video, but there's a warrior in this group, and I was being nice. I just let it go because I wanted, this was a good example for this video. He is specifically trying to pull threat on at least one mob per group, trying to pull threat so that he can get more fury or more rage and do more damage. That's his reasoning behind, trying to make my job harder while I'm tanking here. And I'm playing a paladin tank, or I'm tanking as a paladin anyways in this video. And paladin tanks in WoW Classic do not have a taunt. The only thing I can really do is judgment to get a big jump in threat. So this guy was an issue throughout the entire dungeon, which, let's be honest, if you are tanking in WoW Classic, I'm going to give you some advice. Be the group leader. And that way, if someone is doing something like this to you, you can ask them to stop, and if they don't, just kick them out. You can find someone to replace them in about a minute. DPS are just, easy to find. Everybody's waiting on the tank. So if you are tanking, you don't have to put up with it. Don't put up with it. The more people get kicked out of groups for acting like jackasses like this, the more the more people will behave and actually, try and do their role in a group more. I think I think if this happened enough, it might actually make a difference. But anyways, there are some things specifically that you need to avoid doing. Number one, um, you don't want to front load your threat. So usually in WoW Classic, you'll have a warrior or a druid tank. Paladin tanks are kind of on the rare side, but it applies to them too. But you see your tank run in and get to the group. You you have high threat abilities on a lot of classes that will specifically say this ability causes a high amount of threat. So if your tank is just run in, that is not a good time to be using one of those abilities. Some examples of this is for a warrior, heroic strike. I know at lower levels, that's really all you have for damage. So, you know, I get it, but put a rend out on a couple targets before you start throwing heroic strike. I mean, it's not that hard. Or just let your rage build up while the tank gets through. Priests, Mind Blast is a high threat ability. Do not lead with this ability. I don't care if that's your rotation. You can put your dots on the target and let the tank get a little bit of threat before you might go into mind blasting everything. Just saying. Mages. Arcane Explosion, Blizzard. These are not abilities you want to use as soon as the tank goes in. You're just going to piss off your tank every time. Hunters. Don't use multi-shot. And while we're on hunters, do not have your pet's growl on while you're in a dungeon. Unless a mob goes for the healer, yeah, sure, put your pet on that mob, have it growl, and then try and take it back to where the tank is. But there's no reason for you to have growl on in a dungeon. You're just making the tank's life harder. Warlocks. Same thing with the pet. If you have a Voidwalker out in a dungeon, I mean, that's not a great idea. You have better pets available in almost every situation, unless you're doing something specific that you need it for. But having your taunt on your Voidwalker, I mean, that why would you? Also, Searing Pain is a high threat ability. Don't use it. You know, rogues. If you see the tank run in and he goes to hit a target, do not immediately ambush. I mean, you would think these kind of things would be obvious. Apparently, they're not. This happens to me all the time. So that's just a few examples of things that you really shouldn't do. Some of the things you should do. You should have a threat meter for the first thing. Just to have some idea of, you know, what the rankings look like on the threat and how much damage you can do without pulling threat before you need to switch targets. I mean, that's really not that hard to figure out this late in the game, right? I feel like everyone should have a threat meter by this point. Most classes have threat dropping abilities, threat reduction abilities. Rogues, you can feint. You can vanish if the feint doesn't work. Hunters, you can feign death. You can disengage. I mean, if you're pulling threat on a hunter, to me that just means you're a bad hunter. I mean, honestly, because every 30 seconds you can reduce your threat to 0. There's no reason for you to be pulling threat. Priests have fade. There's a lot of examples of threat reduction abilities in this game. Druids, you will get Cower about level 28 for cat form. You can drop threat. Mages and warlocks, I don't think can drop threat that I can think of. All I can really think of for a mage is Ice Block, and that's later, and it's not a threat drop. It just makes you invulnerable, and they'll attack someone else. Paladins, you can bubble and do the same thing. You have Blessing of Salvation as well. That'll reduce your threat if you need it. There's just all kinds of examples here of things you could do. In order to just not make your tank's life hell when you're trying to do these dungeons. I think we already talked about not front loading threat. Yeah. So one of the main reasons I want to talk about this is because every tanking class in this game needs to get hit, wants to get hit. They want every single mob that is engaged attacking them. And the reason for that is because paladins, which I'll go over first because that's what's in the clip here, paladins' threat, a lot of their threat comes from blocking. So, whenever they can get blocks, that's going to help them keep threat a lot better. Paladins don't have a taunt, so that's kind of essential that they get threat at the start and keep it. So there's a lot of things you can do to help a paladin tank out with that, like we just went over. Warriors and druids, you need rage to use all of your abilities, and most of the rage that you're going to get while tanking is going to come from being hit. So if people are actively going out of their way to pull threat on every pull, you're going to be rage starved all the time, and you're not going to be able to use most of your abilities. And the bad thing is this kind of snowballs. You're never going to get enough rage built up to where you can go into the next group and have enough rage to immediately, put a Sunder Armor on everything, and a Heroic Strike on every single target, and not have to worry about threat at all for that group because you went in with extra rage. You're never going to get that chance if you have DPS in the group that are actively keeping you from keeping threat. And that it goes farther than that, though. Most of the time, whenever a group has to stop, it's for the healer to drink, right? The most efficient way for a healer to get through a dungeon is to heal one target and one target only, right? Now, obviously, you're not always going to be able to do that. There's some AoE damage from different mobs in the game. That's a whole nother thing. But for the most part, the tank should be really the only person that the healer has to worry about 90% of the time. So anytime as a DPS that you're pulling threat like that, you're actually slowing the group down because the healer's going to have to stop and drink more often. The more the healer is having to throw heals on everyone else in the group instead of just one person, it just gets more inefficient the longer it goes. So yeah, I highly suggest, asking people to quit doing what they're doing to pull through it, and if they don't, kick their asses out, because you can replace them easily. Uh, so that's all I had to talk about in this video. I'd like to know what you think. Uh, be sure to leave me a like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz, and I'll see you in the next one.